Hello, everyone. This is another Black Conservative. I am Ryan Bowling. Thank you all for joining me once again. So here we go with this situation again here in the state of Florida, where a group of black parents feel that the school systems in Florida is basically subjecting their children to race hating, if you will, if you want to call it that. And basically what they're arguing is that the black history in America, per se, is under attack, and that they're finding other alternatives to teach their children about what they believe to be true black history. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to read a portion of this article here from the Washington Post. And I want to analyze some of this information, and I want to give you guys a startling statement from a black economist by the name of Walter Williams, who's passed some years ago. Some of you may have heard of him before. And he makes the same argument that Ron DeSantis had the Florida school systems put in the black history curriculum. And the idea is that black slaves during slavery learned certain skills that helped them or benefited them later on. That's what a big hoopla is, because people on the left are screaming and hollering and being butthurt and saying things like, excuse me, well, you are justifying slavery by, okay, by saying that black slaves learned certain skills that helped them. You justify slavery. But let's get right into the argument, because I have something definitely to say about this. I don't believe at all he's justifying slavery. As a matter of fact, I believe that the liberal establishment and the liberal school systems and the liberal Marxist communist teachers are purposely keeping blacks and whites divided on purpose. This is a communist front. I can tell a communist front man from a long shot. It's a communist front keeping us divided. But I'm going to explain to you the detail of that, and I'm going to read you a portion from Walter Williams' book that's going to perhaps blow your mind if you don't know about it. Okay, so let's get right into this article. I mean, man, everything is about race. Everything is about race. Race this, race that. My thought pattern is this. If everything is about race, don't you think something is funky about that? If every article is yakking about race, if every politician is yakking about race, and it's usually the left, it's usually Democrats and the left, y'all know I'm telling the truth. Conservatives are always on the defense. It's usually Democrats and the left. They're youpity yakking about race. Don't you think there's something funky about that? Don't you think there's something peculiar about that? When it comes time down to voting, it's always about race. Okay, let's get right into this. Let's get right into this. I mean, you would think people would see that by now, but I guess they're not seeing it. But let's get right into this. After Florida banned an AP African American history class earlier this year, Alkel King scrambled to find a way to bridge the gap for his 16-year-old daughter. Taking a black history course in college had raised his self-esteem, said King, and he wanted a similar experience for Abanisia, who is named after the ancient term for Ethiopian. I hope I didn't butcher the name. He signed her up for a new 10-week course over the summer that served up lessons on African kingdoms and the Black Panthers, the civil rights group, not the movie characters, which I find to be interesting here because it says served up lessons on African kingdoms and the Black Panthers. The Black Panthers? African kingdoms, Black Panthers. African kingdoms, Black Panthers. What is the connection there? In my opinion, none really, because the Black Panthers was a militant communist front group. Yes, they were. I'm not going to go into the detail of that, but communist insurgents had infiltrated that movement, just like many of them infiltrated, believe it or not, the civil rights movement, and tried to change Martin Luther King's mindset. But that's another story, and I digress. Oh, yeah, it's been documented, okay? What these communists do, they infiltrate already established groups, and they infiltrate them with their ideology and worldview, and they convince the head people and individuals to adopt their worldview and make them think that they're on their side when they're not. They're just using that as a front to dismantle the country, to dismantle the society and rebuild it again into a communist state. That's their goal. African Kingdoms and the Black Panthers. The civil rights group, not the movie. Why would you want to? Let's read it again. He signed her up for a new 10-week course over the summer that served up lessons on African Kingdoms and the Black Panthers. What I see here, this is what I see in this statement here. The purpose is to show them first how great Africa was. All the African kingdoms, how great they were, how advanced they were, how rich they were, how intellectually progressive they were. And they were. They were. A lot of African kingdoms were. I used to study this type of stuff before 2016. So I'm familiar with that. They were. Okay? They were. And that may have helped build the self-esteem of the children. I get it. It builds your self-esteem, makes you feel like you can do whatever you want to do. But I'm not going to go into detail right now. I could really go on and on with that, but I don't lose my train of thought. But the Black Panthers, you connected with Black Panthers. What I see in this is infuse the young people's minds with what they had, what their ancestors, or rather what the people of African descent had in Africa, show how great they were, and then give them lessons on the Black Panthers, which was a militant communist group, okay? A militant communist group to get them angry at the white establishment. Get them thinking, man, these white people took everything from us from Africa. They messed us up. They did this, they did that. And get them to thinking on the level, if you will, or the thinking and the mentality of the Black Panthers. Because there is no connection, the way I see it, between the African kingdoms and the Black Panthers. African kingdoms and the Black Panthers, a militant group, a militant pro-black, communist group. The Black Panthers literally used, I think that the communist dictator Mao Zedong, I can't pronounce his name, but because I'm not good at names, you guys know that. But he was the communist dictator, the first communist dictator of China, 1940s. And he created a book known as was called the Red Book, that every person had to read. Okay, all of the followers had to read. What's interesting about this is that the civil rights group, the Black Panthers, every one of the members of the Black Panthers had to read that Red Book. The Red Book of communism, created by the dictator Mao of communist China, was a ideology, a platform, a expose, if you will, on how to create a communist country with violence and destruction. That's what the book was about. The members of the Black Panthers, every last one of them, had to read that book. They had to have a copy of that book. So clearly, excuse me, clearly they had been infiltrated. The group had been infiltrated. Where did they get that book from? And what I found out in my studying and reading is that at the time, Chinese communist insurgents had basically infiltrated the group, the Black Panthers themselves. I don't know if it was like that they were actually Chinese or Asian, but the concept, the ideology came from China, communist China. And they basically infiltrated the Black Panthers group and gave them this information, gave them the Red Book. So it was a communist front group. So the whole idea of teaching this supposed 10-course platform, teaching the young kids about African kingdoms, and then teaching them about the Black Panther movement, what I see there is the purpose is to conquer and divide. Incite the young Black people with the mindset of we need to take back control of Africa, and we need to take back control of what we have here. It's ours. We need to take back control of it. And what's the best way to do that? To infuse them with communist ideology coming from the Black Panthers. Because other than that, there's no other reason why you would be giving them information on the Black Panther. Why would you be doing that? It makes no sense. But anyway, let's go on. Not a lot of people know that there were great ancient African kingdoms, the article goes on to say, the person goes on to say, with riches and with huge civilizations and power and culture, Abanisha said. It was really, really cool to get a better understanding of that. And I agree. That is true. There were a lot of great African kingdoms with riches and with huge civilizations and power and culture. That is so true. And as a matter of fact, many of those African kingdoms the way a lot of these TV shows like Roots, which was a great show. I'm not arguing, Roots was a good series. The way they showed the Europeans going into these African countries was we coming in and we just taking over everybody. We just going to come in and throw nets on everybody. But that is not how it happened. It did not happen that way. And part of the reason why it did not happen that way was because a lot of these African countries were well established and they were highly armed. They didn't have guns per se, but they were highly armed. And a lot of the European countries at the time did not have the technology to go in mass and start taking over Africa. That wasn't until sometime many years later when they had gained the ability to create guns and so forth. Then they were able to do that. But before then, that was not the case. That was a total fabrication for entertainment purposes or whatever. But people absorbed that lie and said that's how it was. No, that was not how it was. As this individual said, it was absolutely right. Ancient African kingdoms had riches and huge civilizations and power and culture. You can talk about Egypt, you can talk about Nubia, you can talk about Yoruba and others all day. I used to study that type of stuff before 2016. 2016 was when I came out the Matrix, but that's another story and I digress. But yeah, shoot. And that stuff can build your self-esteem. It can build the self-esteem of a person who feels like that they can't do anything. But I want to say something about that, building the self-esteem, okay? I do believe to some extent that learning those kind of things can build your self-esteem. Learning about Black history, learning about ancient African history, if you will, learning about ancient African kingdoms and ancient African civilizations can help build your self-esteem. My only challenge is this, that as an American, do you need that? Because do you need to know about these ancient kingdoms and ancient civilizations? Do you really need to know that to the point where it's like, okay, whatever the school put before me, I can do it. Do you really need that? Because I'm going to give you an example. Say, for instance, a Black child doesn't know anything about the ancient African civilization, that they're ignorant of that kind of history, but yet they get straight A's in math, straight A's in history, straight A's in science, or if they don't get straight A's, they get good grades. They're on their way. They're in clubs and all this. They're on their way up. They're majoring in things that are scientifically complicated and mathematically complicated. Do they need to know about ancient African civilizations to build their self-esteem? I would say no. And there are a lot of Black people who are like, well, maybe I shouldn't say a lot of Black people, but there are a decent number of Black young people who are smart, just like I just described, who might not know that much about ancient African history or ancient African civilizations rather, but yet they're still excelling in school. So the question is do we need to know about ancient African civilizations to build self-esteem? It depends on the mindset of the parents who's teaching that. Because if you teach the child, and this is just my view before I go any further, if you teach the child that the white man did this and the white man did that, and you'll never progress in life and you'll never get what you want to get because white people are going to always hold you down. If everything is about white people oppressing you and everything is about white people this and white people that, then what you are doing, whether the parent realizes it or not, is you are implanting in that child's mind an inferiority complex. You're planting in their mind, unbeknownst to yourself probably, an inferiority complex. So now they're at a state where they feel like if they try to strive to achieve excellence in whatever they put their mind on, they're not going to be able to do it. Why? Because the white man is going to hold them down. White man is going to hold them back. Never mind the fact that you got millions of blacks all over this country, and let's add the world, that are very, very successful. Many of them are millionaires, and some are even billionaires. Yes, some are even billionaires. Why didn't the white man hold them down? We can't say the white man picked certain people and white man picked. You can't say that. Because if the white man's objective is to hold black people down, they would hold all black people down. Not just elevate some and then host. That don't make sense. That makes no sense to me. But you're in a sense, you're basically subjugating that child to a mentality of being inferior. Now you say, okay, in order for you, son or daughter, to be successful, you need to know ancient African history. So they study all this ancient African history. They study all the cultures and all of that, right? And they say, man, that's awesome. That's great. I never experienced anything that I never knew that there were pharaohs, black pharaohs, and I never knew any of that. I never knew about the great buildings that they constructed. I never knew anything about that. That's awesome. That's awesome. That's like magnificent. But then they go to school, the public schools, and they have to solve a semi-complicated math problem, or they have to solve a scientific problem, or whatever. Is knowing about those ancient African civilizations going to help them solve that complicated math problem? Is knowing about ancient African civilizations going to help them solve that scientific problem? You see what I'm saying? It may put within them a mind that you can do whatever you put your brain to do, but if they don't learn the American system of how to do that math problem, if they don't learn the American system of how to analyze that scientific problem, if they don't learn that system, they're going to fail nevertheless. No matter how confident they may feel, they haven't learned how to master the concepts of the American system. So now they're like, man, I learned all about ancient Africa and how they did this. And that. For example, I hear this all the time from people. Man, you know, the blacks built the pyramids. These were mathematically highly advanced. They used highly advanced mathematical designs and all the rest. Okay, good. They did. Okay, we can argue that. Although there's a lot of other things going, we can argue that. Okay, good. Okay, and now let's look at but we're facing a trigonometry problem. We're facing a calculus problem here. Knowing about how the ancient Egyptians built the pyramids using highly complicated and advanced mathematical formulas, it's not going to help me deal with how to deal with this, do this calculus problem. Because if I don't listen to the teacher who might be white, that this is what you need to do, Mr. Bowling. You need to do this, 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 and this. And I have in my mind, oh, well, you know, ancient Africans, they use highly math. That means nothing. I need to learn the system of present day America and what the teacher is telling me to learn how to solve this present day calculus problem. You can learn all you can about ancient Africa. It's good. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing wrong with it at all. But as I said, we're in America. We're in America. We need to learn how America functions. If we want to learn how these ancient Africans, then people need to go back to those countries. I'm just real with you. If you're so into that, then I feel like what's the point in being here? Because you're going to always feel disenfranchised. You're going to always feel neglected. You're going to always feel like somebody's holding something back from you. And let me say this before I go any further, because I'm going over this. Because I got to get some more information. The whole idea of the schools teaching all these types of black history and so forth, you got to look at this from this perspective. And I'm going to give you guys my opinion on this. Whatever country you go to, right? Wherever country you go to, I'm just using a scenario here. And you look into the school systems, that country is going to focus the students' attentions on the concepts and the belief systems and the customs and the methodologies of that country. They may mention a little bit of other countries and how they did things, but that's their country. So the purpose is to, and it is what it is, to indoctrinate you with the belief systems of that country. Now, I hate to use the term indoctrination, but it is what it is. To indoctrinate you with the belief systems of that country so that you will reflect what that country's ideology, that country's worldview, that country's educational system, that country's political system. Why would they spend all their time focusing on teaching you another country's way of operating? Because when you graduate, what are you going to do? How are you going to function in the present country that you're in if all you was doing was getting information from about another country? It's not going to help you function in the present country. You know where I'm going with this. If all these schools are focusing on Black history, we need to give them all this. It needs to be advanced. It needs to be okay, it's good in and of itself. But what these students really need is to learn how to do math, learn how to do science, learn how to freaking read, learn how to write, learn how to do the things that's going to help them think outside the box when they graduate. Learn how to do basic math. Even math is in some schools are being told that's European. You don't even learn how to do that. That's European. These are some, I'm saying, I'm talking to you. I'm explaining to you guys exactly what some teachers are actually saying. I'll never forget it. A professor in a college, black professor, one of these liberal hack jobs, literally said in a video that in an interview several years ago that learning math is Eurocentric and that blacks fail in it because it's Eurocentric, something along that line, and that blacks don't need to learn it. So basically but in essence, what they're saying is, see, this is what bothers me about it. People never see what's going on. They think they're really embracing something that's revolutionary. No, you're not. You're embracing stupidity. You're embracing ignorance. What this teacher is actually promoting, whether they know it or not, because they themselves have been indoctrinated by Marxists and communist mumbo jumbo, is that they're indoctrinating the students to be stupid. Because math is designed to help you think. That's why a lot of people don't like to do it nowadays. They don't like math. I just not was good. I'm not good at math. Oh, I'm not good at math. Basically what you're saying in so many ways is that you're not good at thinking. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some people that are more proficient in math than others. Me, I hated math. But I hated math. You know, it wasn't my thing. My thing was writing. Okay. So I'm not saying, people be proficient, but I hear this all the time. I'm not good at math. I'm not good at math. I'm good at math. But you at least got to put some effort for it, because math to some degree helps you to think. It helps you to analyze problems. That's what it's all about. Analyzing problems, figuring things out. That's what math helps you do in a bigger scheme of things. But if you're telling students, you're telling black kids, well, that's just learning math is just Eurocentric stuff, which is stupid, because going back to ancient Egypt, as was said before, these people, these liberals, these hack job Marxist liberals say stuff out of one side of their head and go out, and it comes and go on one side and come out the end. Okay, because in the same vein, they'll say, well, you know what, the ancient African the ancient Africans and the ancient Egyptians use highly advanced mathematical formulas to build the pyramid. But yet at the same time, these idiots are getting up here telling you, well, you know what, you shouldn't learn math. The reason why you can't learn math because it's Eurocentric and you don't need to learn that. You're contradicting your very history. You claim to be, and I guarantee you ask the Marxists about them, the black Marxists, whether or not they, we're descendants of people in Egypt. They'll probably be the first ones to say yes, because it's all about black, right? But yeah, at the same vein, they'll sit up and say something stupid like what I just said. Well, you kids don't need to learn math, and you don't need to learn how to write, and you don't need to learn how to read, because that's all Eurocentric. When you live in America, those are things you need to learn how to do in order to function in an American system. If you hate America, what's the point in being here? Go somewhere else and learn their system so that you can learn how to operate in that system. But you're in America, boo-boo. You got to learn the American system, whether you like it or not. So for a school to focus all their attention on teaching you somebody else's system, it's only going to hurt you in the long run because you're an American system. So you got to learn the American way, boo. Let's go on, man. I mean, these people are tripped, man. These people are tripping. Let's go on because I got some other stuff I got to cover here, man. Okay. Anyway, it says, across the country, now the article goes on to say, across the country, the teaching of black history has been put under a microscope. In Florida, new standards require teachers to say that enslaved people may have benefited from skills learned in slavery. And the state banned the advanced placement class on African-American history after determining it, quote, lacks educational value. Texas has banned the teaching of critical race theory, and nationwide libraries are pulling thousands of books off the shelf that contain diverse characters. Conservatives say they are protecting white children from feeling guilty for racist acts and indoctrinating them with liberal theology. Boom. Let's go over this. Okay. Let's go over. Let's read this again. Let's go over this. Across the country, the teaching of black history has been put under a microscope. But what kind of black history are you talking about? Are you talking about true black history, or are you trying to talk about indoctrinating the children with racial divisive concepts? But let's go on. In Florida, new standards require teachers to say that enslaved people may have benefited from skills learned in slavery. Okay. Now, as I said in the introduction to this video, this is where a lot of the intense argument comes up, because the idea is, okay, the teachers are required to say that enslaved people may have benefited from skills learned in slavery. And what the left is arguing is that you guys, that this school curriculum is basically saying you guys are hiding the horrors of slavery, and saying that it basically hiding the horrors of slavery and saying that it really wasn't as bad as it really made out to be. Now, before I even go into the deeper analysis of this, let me say something on this whole concept of this curriculum supposedly hiding the severity of slavery. That's a bunch of bull crap. You want to know why I say that? Because for decades in the school systems in America, all over this country for the most part, we have been, blacks and whites, have been bombarded on how severe slavery was to the black Africans. We were never told that slaves, for the most part, learned certain skills that benefited them in the long run. I'm going to get into the detail of that. We were never told that there were thousands of blacks who owned hundreds of slaves during slavery in America. We were never told that. We were never told that at all, man. We were never told that there were black slaves that actually were that actually earned their freedom, bought their freedom, and created businesses. We were never told that at length. We were constantly bombarded over our head about how horrible slavery was to black Africans in this country. Now, I'm going to give you, before I go into the detail about what I'm going to read to you about this whole benefits thing, but it's benefiting blacks, blacks learning certain crafts and skills that benefited them in slavery. I'm going to give you the reason why I believe that's that the schools focus more on the horrors of slavery rather than on blacks learning certain skills and that help them later on. Because as long as you focus on how oppressed slaves were and how bad they had it during American slavery, the students that are listening to this will always feel like they can't do anything on their own. They're going to always have a embittered attitude towards white people, thus keeping us divided. And they're going to always, for the most part, look to the government to be the one to fix their problems. That's going back to slavery, boo-boo. As long as I can bombard you with this idea that, oh, the slaves were just, oh, they were just so messed up. And it was horrible. It was very oppressive physically, and it was very oppressive psychologically. Okay, it was. But we were constantly bombarded with that. What is wrong with telling the students that, hey, there were some slaves that actually learned certain crafts that benefited them in the long run? And it did. Because they didn't tell you that at length, Because if they did tell black students that, then that would suggest to them that, hey, man, you can do whatever you set your mind to do. Here you have slaves that learn certain skills that helped them even in slavery. So if you have slaves that learn skills that even help them in slavery, then I'm not a slave. So that means that I'm physically free and psychologically free. If they could do that, then I can do whatever I set my mind to do. They don't want that. Contemporary liberalism doesn't want that. They want division, because as long as they can keep blacks thinking that they are oppressed by bombarding them with the horrors of slavery, and as long as they have them thinking like that, then they're going to stay in this mindset of, I hate white people. White people is a problem because of my problems and all the rest. Then guess what happens when it comes time to vote? They're going to vote for this. The party that reflects that worldview. Come on, man. Come on, wake up and smell the coffee. Now, I'm going to go a little further in this whole idea of slaves actually, certain slaves, not all, benefiting from certain skills that they learned. Okay? Now, while they were in slavery. Now, I want to read you guys a book written by a man by the name, I'm going to read you a portion of a passage written by a man by the name of Walter Williams. The name of the title of his book is Race and Economics, How Much Can Be Blamed on Discrimination. And it's a fabulous book. I think I said this earlier in the introduction of this video. He was a black economist who died some years ago. Walter Williams and Thomas Sowell they basically became allies, and they basically became close friends, so to speak, while in college, earning their doctorate degree, I believe. And they had a lot of similarities in worldviews. And Walter Williams says here in a portion of this book here, he argues here that there were a lot of slaves, or a significant number of slaves, who actually learned certain crafts and skills that benefited them during slavery and after slavery. This is a black man saying this. So let's get into this. Just follow me down the yellow brick road here. Be a little patient with me, okay? Let's go on. It says, many slaves exhibited great entrepreneurial spirit despite their handicaps. Even slave women were often found growing and selling produce in the South Carolina and Georgia Low County. After putting in a day's work, some slaves were allowed to raise their own crops and livestock. Now, this is not all slaves, obviously. He's saying some slaves. But see, you will never hear this in detail. You never heard this in detail in the schools in the past. Because the purpose is to beat you over the head about how oppressive slavery was to blacks, to keep us always walking around needy. But anyway, let's go on. These efforts allowed them to gain a presence in much of the marketing network on the streets and docks of port cities. Ultimately, the South Carolina General Assembly passed a law requiring that slave-grown group crops and livestock be sold only to the master. However, the law was very difficult to enforce, particularly among blacks who had gained knowledge of the marketplace. This was during slavery, folks. These blacks gained knowledge of the marketplace. Market activity by slaves was so great that North Carolina whites mounted a campaign to stop slave, quote, dealing and trafficking altogether. In 1741, that state passed a law prohibiting slaves from buying, selling, trading, or bartering, quote, any commodities whatsoever, or to raise hogs, cattle, or horses on any pretense whatsoever. But let's go on. During the colonial period, some slaves brought their freedom and acquired property. In Virginia's Northampton County, 44 out of 100 blacks had gained their freedom by 1664, and some had become landowners. During the late 18th century, blacks could boast of owning land. James Purvis owned 3,250 acres in St. Paul's Parish in the Charleston district of South Carolina. Purvis also possessed 113 slaves. He possessed 113 slaves. Black man, brother. It's a brother. Cabinet maker John Gould owned several buildings in Charleston and others in the coastal South. During the late 18th and early 19th centuries, free blacks in Charleston had established themselves as relatively independent from an economic standpoint. As early as 1819, The Emancipation Proclamation hadn't even begun yet. They comprise 30 types of workers, including, watch this, here's where the skill sets come in. 10 tailors, 11 carpenters, 22 seamstresses, 6 shoemakers, and 1 hotel owner. That may not be a whole lot, but the fact is some of them did acquire skills. That helped them. 30 years later, there were 50 types, including 50 carpenters, 43 tailors, 9 shoemakers, and 21 butchers. New Orleans had the largest population of free blacks in the Deep South. The Deep South. The Deep South. Okay, the Deep South, where the slaves, it was really hard down there for them, okay? Let's go on. Though they could not vote, they enjoyed more rights than blacks in other parts of the South, such as the right to travel freely and to testify in court against white people. They owned some $2 million worth of property. And back in those days, $2 million was a whole lot. And dominated skilled crafts. Here we go again. Like bricklaying, cigar making, carpentry, and shoemaking. New Orleans blacks also created privately supported benevolent societies, schools, and orphanages to assist their impoverished brethren. I could go on, but this video will be an hour long. But you get the point. You get the point. There's more to that, but you get the point. So this whole idea of people getting mad at Ron DeSantis incorporating this in the curriculum don't know their history. And like I said, let me sum this video up. The only reason I believe that they don't want you blacks to know this is because they don't want you to think independent. Because as long as you think that blacks during slavery, some of the blacks during slavery learned certain skills, and just what I read to you right there, and there's more to that, okay, became entrepreneurs during slavery or shortly after, to know that, that would empower blacks. We don't want to empower you. We want you to be hateful. We want you to be always angry. So we bombard you with how horrible slavery was to the blacks. We want you to think that so that you will always stay divided. So when it comes time for you to vote, you're going to vote for the political party, i.e. the Democrats, who were the ones upholding slavery at the time anyway. But it's another story and I digress. You will always vote for the Democrats, thus keeping them in power. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. People funny, man. I wish I could do more. I wish I could talk about this more. But you guys can read that article in the Washington Post on your own. I just wanted to give that information there because I believe personally it's a whole bunch of hogwash. I believe we're being purposely divided. I believe that the left and the far left, whichever one you want to call it, is doing so. And let me reiterate this before I close this video. And I did the last video I did on this whole idea about the left and liberals. They both the same, okay? And I talked about classical liberalism and I talked about contemporary liberalism. This contemporary liberalism is a bunch of hogwash. It is a variation, a soft form of communism because why? The ultimate objective is to gain absolute control over your lives through the legislative process rather than with violence and guns. Create a revolution that may lead to violence and guns, but do so through the legislation process. Keep everybody divided. Keep them divided. Let me say this, and I promise you I'll close. Football season has begun. And what I was hearing from one particular YouTube content creator that I can't remember exactly who the team was, but when the national anthem was open, they began to sing. They started off with singing Lift Your Voice, whatever, and whatever, which is a black anthem, if you will. And then they sung the national anthem. And I'm not going to even get into I'm not going to even get into the retardation of that, because that, to me, is keeping us further divided. Division is the objective, not unity, because the national anthem is for all Americans. If you were born in America, black, white, whatever, or if you immigrated from another country and you got your green card and you went through the process like you were supposed to do legally, You are an American. You adopt American ideology and American customs and mentalities. That makes you an American. If you adopt the Constitution, you believe in the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence and the Bill of Rights, that makes you an American. Doesn't matter what your racial tone is. But when you play some nonsense like that, you keep everybody divided. And that is the objective. And I stand on that. I stand on that because I believe that that's what it is. And it needs to stop. Black people, we need to wake up. We need to wake up and see what they're doing. And that's what I wanted to say about that. What do you guys think? Leave your comments in the comment section below. Like, share, subscribe to my channel. God bless you all. See you again.